Hello, Thiesh Gaming here, back with another video, this time covering TBC speedrun slash skew comps. So if you've been watching my channel, you will have seen my Why is the Meta video, which you can find at the top of the screen now. And in that case, I went over how a balanced comp will fit in all these different classes, all of these different debuffs and buffs, so that all of them can synergize together and everyone can excel. A skew comp is a little different though. The theory behind a skew comp is that rather than trying to fit all the debuffs in, you focus on one set and then fill your additional spots with more damage. So in TBC, this will either be a physical or a magical skew comp. And the pros to this are that it's easier to apply or to have redundant debuffs. And you stack a single damage type, which means that all of your debuffs will apply to that kind of damage, and you can play for optimal conditions. By which I mean, if you, for example, do best in 15 target AoE situations, you can set up 15 target AoE situations much easier than a balanced comp, which will always have a median level of performance split between its members. So the downsides are the gearing overlap. Since you're running more of a specific class of character, in this case physical or magical, the gear that you are going to want is going to skew towards either physical or magical, which means more competition, which means lower gear quality in the raid. The other main problem is mechanic susceptibility. If there is a mechanic which specifically punishes magical or physical, then you are going to be more susceptible to that as a comp than a raid that is balanced. Comps will also have to change based on the raid. So in TK you need a hunter to kill Kael'thas, he tanks the bow. And in SSC-BT you need a warlock to tank Leotheris or Illidan. And I'd just like to make a quick shout out to Snow and Zyrene. They did an amazing discussion on the Roguecraft podcast, which really inspired this video. I'm actually going to show Zyrene's comp later on, and if you are interested in their content, you can see their Twitter handles in the text here, and I'll include a link below. So, the melee stack. Why stack melee? Well, the pros is that it's much easier to stack Sunder. In the balanced comp, you are sitting at 3 warriors, which means you're going to have to try very hard to stack Sunder, and it's not going to be fast, even especially on multiple targets. Fury Warriors actually offer really good cleave damage, so unlike Classic where they're the undisputed kings of everything, what they are in TBC is the kings of cleave, especially 4-5 target cleave. That's where your whirlwinds and sweeping strikes can really clean up. In this comp you have hunters who are providing the single target range DPS for bosses, and the harder, tougher trash. And you will also include a warlock for range tanking, and another major benefit is that you will have relative mana independence on trashes and bosses, mostly because you're using rage and energy and not mana. So the cons to this comp is that you are more susceptible to melee mechanics and distance. And what I mean by distance is if there's a mob that you have to kill, and then there's another mob 35 yards away that you have to kill. If you have an all melee comp, everyone has to run and then intercept, or run and not intercept and just run to the new mob before you can start DPSing. Whereas a heavier range comp, they can just tab to the new mob and start doing damage. The other problem is that compared to the other comp, which we'll be discussing, the AoE potential on greater than 5 targets is lower. So AoE on 5 or less targets, really high. AoE on more than 5 targets, a bit lower. So we have 2 comps here. There's the Zyrene comp on the left and the Thiesh comp on the right. Zyrene's comp, I think, is much easier to execute on drums and actually has higher damage. This is my kind of tweak and take on it, which is more focused on tank threat, and I sub out 1 Fury Warrior for an Elemental Shaman just for some ranged burst and cleave. Isn't settled which comp is better. I think that especially early on with the 8-yard drums, that the Zyron comp may in fact be superior, but I think that in later tier 6/ZA release, then you will see the Maya comp, the Athesh comp, be better just because you can spread drums out and it becomes less of a concern. The other Skew comp is the range stack, and obviously includes lots of warlocks. So the benefit to this one is that you have good single target damage from the warlocks, and you have really high AoE on greater than 5 targets. So warlocks, their AoE is better the more targets there are. It's not. It has a pretty high cap as far as an AoE cap. So this means that you can pull lots. This is the pull lots of stuff comp. That's why you're running 2 protection paladins, so you can maybe even do multiple trash pulls at the same time. And being that it's mostly warlocks, it's more mana independent than many other full caster comps. And you have 2 shadow priests so that you can stack up your shadow weaving quicker. Normally it takes a while to stack up shadow weaving, but 2 shadow priests stack it twice as fast. The main issue with this is that there's really high gear overlap. Everyone is caster, everyone wants caster gear. That means that you are going to have a lot of fights for this. Unlike the melee comp, which can craft their weapons, every weapon has to drop from a raid here. So you have mages, shadows, elementals, destructions, all wanting the same weapons. And in some cases, the paladins will want them too for threat. This is also really dependent on the paladin's gear in order to do large pulls, just to survive. And the other issue is that you need to include some not as good synergistic classes. So specifically, you need a warrior who just does warrior utility. So Demo Shout, Thunderclap, Sunder. Sunder's less necessary, but Demo Clap is really what you need in order to raise the number of mobs that you can tank without your paladins just falling over. This one didn't have a comp example listed in the podcast, so this is just my attempt at it. The free spot is healer or ranged DPS, depending on what you need. I'd be open for suggestions. Otherwise, will it be better than a balance comp? The question you're all here to know. I think that for non-serious speedrunning guilds, so people who aren't currently speedrunning Nax, this will be less optimal, mostly from a personnel standpoint. A balance comp lets you recruit from a wider pool, because you want some hunters, you want some druids, you want some warriors. Pick a little bit of everything. You can seek out the cream of the crop in each role. It'll also lead to less competition for gear, all the kind of things that is a just solid clearing guild you may value above being the absolute fastest. For the serious speedrunning guilds, this should be considered. These are going to be the guilds that have split runs, that have very high average player skills, so that if there are mechanics which limit melee DPS, they're going to have the players that can overcome and beat those mechanics through skill. If there's gear challenges where you need to have super high geared players, with lots of all the crafting and consumes and constant buffing and consuming, they're going to have the players with the dedication to do that. So as far as the total benefit, it'll be really interesting to see in a real raid setting what the differences between the two approaches are, and the differences between the two skew comps. Because will the melee one be better because they can all start with near abyss weapons? Will the caster one be better because of relative safety and larger AoE pulls? It kind of remains to be seen. So that's just what I wanted to cover, get an idea in your head. If you have anything that you'd like to add or critique or comment on, then happily I will take your comments, leave them below, and you'll get a response from me. So thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it.